So hello, and thank you again for joining us for this Learning and Growing 2021 presentation on student engagement and remote learning, note-taking for quant heavy classes. My name is Sarah Chandler and I'm on the training and support team here at Hawks Learning, and our speaker today is Professor Anisha Nyatee, Assistant Professor at Endicott College. Anisha Nyatee started at the School of Business at Endicott College in the spring of 2018. Nyatee is passionate about teaching and research. She teaches courses in microeconomics and international and corporate finance. Her current research focus on corporate capital structure decisions, mainly looking at how firms choose to finance investments in the face of competition. She's also interested in firms' capital structure choices based on how financially developed the country they operate in is. We will have a live Q&A session with Professor Nyatee today, so please enter any questions you may have in the Q&A as we go, and we will get to them after the presentation. This webinar is being recorded and will be sent to all attendees when the video is processed and ready for distribution. But on that note, I will go ahead and hand it over to our presenter.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for joining this morning. It is indeed a pleasure to share some of my successes and hope that it will help some of you with some of the great things that you're already doing in the classes. So I will go ahead and share my screen just so that we're looking at the same thing. This isn't a very long presentation. I'll just go about some of the challenges, or I'll speak about some of the challenges that I encountered last spring when we had to switch to remote instruction almost overnight. And then I'll talk about some of the strategies, basically the main strategy that worked for me. And what I have found in the last year is that this may be something that I may incorporate even when we go back to fully in-person learning in the fall. I have found that using the strategy has actually, or I have actually seen deeper student engagement than I have when I was in person in the classroom. And I'll talk about some of the stuff as we go through the presentation. I'll first go ahead and just share my screen. So we're looking at the same thing here. Okay, so I will be presenting on a student engagement in the remote setting, note-taking for quant-heavy classes. As Sarah mentioned, I mainly teach courses in corporate finance, international finance, and microeconomics, all of which are pretty quant-heavy. So that was a huge concern for me when I had to flip to remote instruction in the spring of last year. Needless to say, the spring of last year was all about just keeping my head above water, but I used the summer to try to brainstorm and come up with some strategies that might work. So just a little bit about myself. My name is Anisha. I am an assistant professor of finance and economics. I teach courses in beginning finance, corporate finance, international finance, and microeconomics. If you need to get in touch with me and maybe discuss more or talk more about anything that I address in this presentation, then my email will be the best way to reach me. I am pretty good at responding to email, so I will be happy to engage further beyond this presentation if the need arises. Okay, so spring of 2020, there was a sudden change overnight, pretty much. Right before spring break, we were told when you come back, you are going to go to remote instruction. It was pretty challenging. There were limited resources. None of us had really done remote teaching mainstream. So I was concerned as to how I was going to manage. There was a moral conflict personally, between being effective and just being able to get through the content. And my goal for spring of 2020 was to get through the content. I'm not very proud about that, but that was just what I figured I had to do to just get to the end of that semester. Then come the summer of 2020, my institution provided a ton of resources in terms of trainings. I attended, I think, 8 or 10 sessions, and I came out of those sessions really not feeling very confident about anything, because most of the sessions that were delivered were for the humanities, for English classes, which I really couldn't implement in my classes. I mean, my colleagues shared some great ideas, but really, showing a movie and discussing social justice through a movie was not an option for me. So I came out with a certification in excellence in remote teaching, but I really couldn't implement much of that into any of my courses. So when I came back in the fall, I still was pretty unsure about what I was doing, but I was lucky in that I got mostly hybrid classes, which at that point I thought was going to be better than remote. My struggle with the hybrid classes was having, as the semester unfolded, I realized, was having to switch between the in-person and the remote cohorts. I felt that students were more confused than all of them just being remote, because firstly, they were confused about when they would show up, when they wouldn't show up. There was no way for me to mandate that they turn their videos on, so they would leave the video on and, take a break or whatever. So, and when they came back to the in-person class the next time, they didn't know what had happened in the previous class because they were probably not in front of the computer screens. If in a normal non-COVID semester, I present my students with the printed lecture notes because I don't trust them to print it themselves. So this had changed with COVID because I needed them to print the lecture notes themselves to keep up with the lecture. And even then it was a struggle, because with me being in the classroom and delivering the content in the classroom, I only had a literally 4x4 space within which I could write, because that was what the webcam was capturing. So there was a lot of going back and forth between, okay, I write out these 4 steps to the problem. Now I have to erase this. Now I need to write down the next 4 steps. And I found that students were just lost in the material, which to begin with is difficult material. So there had to be a better way to deal with this. In the fall of 2020, I taught 2 hybrid and 2 in-person classes. And as I mentioned, my students struggled more than they would have if everybody was just remote. So come the spring of 21, due to personal reasons, I had to request my institution to let me go completely remote. And I used the winter to come up with how I could improve this process, the teaching and learning process for myself and for my students. So I thought back to my grad school days, and something that I had used as a grad school instructor for in-person learning was the document camera. So I tried to incorporate that into my online instruction. Prior to resorting to the document camera, I had tried to allow myself into my lecture as a guest from my iPad so that I could write on the iPad, but that kind of fell through because my handwriting isn't really great to begin with, and then writing on an iPad, my students couldn't understand much of what I was writing. It had fallen through in the fall. So come December, I requested to go remote. My institution allowed me to go remote, and I resorted to this document camera, and I found that it has been a game changer. My spring courses have been the best courses in my 3.5 years as a professor at Endicott College. Student engagement has been better than I have ever experienced in the last 3 years. So my hope is that, or my thought is that I'm going to use this strategy even as we go back into the classroom, because I think what the students are really lacking is note-taking skill. They don't know how to take notes. So even if you're in person and in the classroom and writing things on the board, they're not sure what they need to write and where they need to write and what part of what you're writing on the board goes with what part of the lecture. So I think this has helped me to not only get them engaged in the material, but also to teach them how to take notes. So this is I'll show you what it looks like. It is a pretty compact device. This is what it looks like, right? So it fits in your bags. and it opens up. So anything that you place under the camera is transmitted to the screen in real time. And I will do a demo briefly. But it's a pretty neat gadget. It's available in a wide range of prices. My institution does not give funds to purchase equipment. So I just bought a pretty cheap one. I think my one costs like $80. It's not great in that it doesn't capture, colored images and such. But if your institution gives you some sort of grant to purchase equipment for teaching, then you can get a pretty neat one for $300 or $400. My one, I think, is like $70. But anyway, so this captures images in real time and projects it on the computer screen. And then once the image is projected on the computer screen, that's the screen I share with my students. So anything that I write in the notes, my students can in real time see what I'm doing, and they have the notes in front of them, so they're able to write on the same on a piece of paper that looks exactly like the piece of paper that I'm writing on. My struggle was how to get them to get the lecture notes printed out. So what I did was I ordered the lecture notes through the college's copy center, and I made it required. Instead of having a textbook required for the class, I made the notes required for the class. My copy center allowed the students to buy them for, I think, 11 or 12 bucks. And then at the start of every class, I have the students hold up the lecture notes to me. So it looks like a book, like the copy center binds it for them. I have them hold it up to show me that they have it. And if they don't have it, I just drop them from the call if they can't show me that they have the lecture notes, because then they can't follow through with the lecture. Some of the benefits that I've enjoyed: students struggle with what to write down in their notes. They struggle with weeding out irrelevant information from an in-person lecture, and hence they either have too much written down or too little. So my experience comparing pre-COVID to current times, what I have seen is that when you're delivering a lecture in person in class, there's a lot of discussion. We end up talking about lots of different things around a certain topic. Some of that stuff is not really relevant from the perspective of the exam, and students have all of that stuff written down, but the stuff that is relevant from the perspective of the exams, they have missed because they don't know how to write the math down. So this has helped with that, because I write down the stuff that I would write down if I was a student in my class. So being able to fill in the lecture notes with them in real time has helped them learn how to take notes in a class that deals with pretty heavy material to start with. Together with the content, I'm also teaching them how to take notes. And given that it's a remote class, I allow them open book exams. So when they go back to look at their notes, they have something concrete to look at, rather than just trying to flip through pages and pages of notes and not even knowing what they're really looking for. So this has really helped me. And my goal for the future is, even when I go back to in-person learning, I'm just going to connect this thing to the computer screen, and I'll project on the screen what I fill in the notes, because I think that's the skill that students need to pick up. And once they have that down, then the learning becomes easier, because they're looking at something that is at least arranged in a more logical manner for them to go back to. So that's all I have with the presentation. I'll just go ahead. Before I go ahead, if you guys have any questions, I'll try to address those, and then I can do a small demo on how this works.
Thank you so much. We do have a couple of questions in the Q&A, so I'll go ahead and read those off. The first one is there a specific brand of a document camera that you would recommend?
The best one, which is a slightly more expensive one, in my experience, is I think the brand is Elmo, E-L-M-O. Those are pretty expensive. They range from, I think, $300 or $400 to like thousands, depending on how granular you want the print to be. That was the brand that I used when I was a grad student for in-person instruction, when I was a PhD student and I taught classes as an instructor. Those were pretty neat, but again, because my university or college doesn't give me funds to purchase equipment, I just wasn't willing to invest, a couple $100. But the one I have is pretty good. I just ordered it off of Amazon. it's not great, but it does the job.
And then the other question that we have in here is, did you consider using a pen tablet such as a Wacom tablet and the draw function in Word or Smart Notebook Basic?
I did. I didn't use these exactly, but what I did use was the iPad. And I tried to use, I think, what's called a whiteboard in Zoom. It's inbuilt into Zoom, but that didn't really work for me because my writing isn't just really great, and then having to write on a tablet. I mean, I was erasing and then I was trying to make it neater, and we lost a lot of instructional time. But I know that one of my other colleagues uses an iPad and allows herself as a co-host into the lecture, and she's able to do that beautifully, and that worked for her. My experience with the document camera has been that because the students are looking at exactly what's in front of them, it's easier for them to follow through with the lecture. Because there are holes in my lecture notes in the sense that I have like a valuation problem, and then that's not solved in the lecture notes. So we solve that problem together in class. So if they know where the solution goes, in which part of the lecture notes, then they can match it when they're studying for the test, as opposed to if they're writing it elsewhere, then they don't know which solution, or they lack the ability to match the solution to the problem.
Right. And then there was just one more comment in here. Beth said, as a lefty, I've used OneNote on a computer with a digitizer, so my hand isn't in the shot all the time.
That's a good idea. I have not actually tried that.
Any other questions at the moment? I know you mentioned you were going to do a little demonstration as well.
Yeah.
Okay.
So I'll just go ahead and just share my computer screen here. So this is what I would be sharing with them. My lecture notes would have the example on there. I would read through the example, what the question asked them to do, and then part by part, I would just write the solution out with them. So we would think the problem out aloud, and then anything that I write in real time, you will see it appear on the computer screen as I write. So if I had to write the information given in this problem, your company has an earnings per share of $4. So I would write your company EPS $4 and whatever else. So as I'm writing, you can see what I'm doing, and the students have this slide in front of them, so they're able to then just write below that slide. And the way I order the lecture notes from the copy center is exactly the notes that I present under the document camera, which makes it easy for them to see what I'm doing, because they're doing the same thing on the same piece of paper that's in front of them. So I have found the strategy extremely helpful. It has worked, and my students have given me great feedback with the strategy, especially for classes that involve a lot of math and graphing for economics. It has been great, and I think it has been better than it was when I was in the classroom, because in the classroom I was writing on the whiteboard, then I was erasing, and then I was writing over. Here the notes are complete, so if I have to refer back and tell them, oh look, we use this formula from this page, then I can flip back and show them where exactly the formula came from. So this has really worked, and if you're looking for a strategy for a class that you teach that has a ton of note taking, a ton of problem solving, from experience, I have found that this document camera has really been a game changer in my classes. If you have any other questions, I will be happy to address. If you have any other suggestions that I could incorporate, I will be really welcoming of those as well. If you want to engage with me further, beyond this talk, then please reach out to me via email. My email, I'll put it in the chat actually. That may be simpler for me to do because my last name is not the simplest. I think I can put it here. Okay, great. Any other questions?
I think those are all the questions at the moment, but thank you so much, Professor Nyatee, and thank you all for attending today. If you have any questions, you can find that your email is in the chat, and then you can also directly email us at marketing@hawkslearning.com, and we will be emailing out the link to this webinar on demand, so that way you have it as well. And actually, it looks like we do have a couple more questions that have come in. If you wanted, we could talk through those really quickly. So one of those is from Michael. Do you ever have your students work out the problem and share with class?
I actually do. I don't do it individually, but I do it through groups. So I put them into breakout rooms because I like that option of, or that option that Zoom provides quite a lot. I think the breakout room mimics most closely what you would have to group work in a live setting. So I do put them into breakout rooms to solve some problems. And then when we come back, I pick on a group to share their work. So yes, I do that.
And then it looks like we have one other question in there. Do you post the notes after lecture? I use my notes in Smartboard to project them and write on them.
Yeah, so this the document camera has a really neat setting where you can record the whole lecture. So as I'm writing, I also record it through, so everything that I write for that lecture gets recorded and saved on my computer. I don't make it available if I don't have to, because I find that if I did that, then I have lots of students treating the class as an asynchronous class. So then they stop attending the class because they know that they can just fall back on what I posted because it's exactly what I did in class. So I don't post them if I don't have to, but if a student has a legitimate excuse, as in they were in hospital or some pressing family need, then I do make the lecture available just to that student. Because again, if I make it available to everyone, then the synchronous setup of the class kind of gets disrupted.
And then this will be the last question that we take. Beth, I think just probably going off of what you had addressed earlier is how do you get students to share, I guess maybe.
You can, so you mean share their solutions, Beth? Is that what you mean?
I think that's what she might have been referring to.
So if you allow them to share their screen, then they are able to, I let them, take a picture of like using their phones, and then they email it to themselves. And then if they open it on their screen and I allow them to share their screen, they're able to share that back with me. But I don't allow all my students to share their screen. I just make sharing available for the group that I pick on to share their solution.
Great. Well, thank you again. It looks like that's just about all the time that we have. And I hope everyone has a great rest of your day. And thank you again, Professor Nyatee, for presenting and everyone for attending.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much. Thank you, everyone. And please reach out to me if you have any questions following this presentation.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.